Happy Tuesday, Dog Nation. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. I hope all of you are getting ready for a very happy Thanksgiving week. I'll give you an update before we're done today on what our schedule is going to be like over the course of the next couple of days. We'll have a lot of DawgNation content for you. Really a show every day but Thursday. Pre-recorded, it will be on Friday. We'll tell you more about that as the show progresses. Busy for us today because I do think that what Georgia gets a chance to do against South Carolina on Saturday is potentially another signal that this program is turning the corner in terms of the offensive upgrade the program's needed for a couple of years. So we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the missing piece from that Georgia offense, the running game from Saturday. We'll do a lot of that. Connor Riley's going to be with us. There's some interesting stuff going on in the SEC right now. We will deal with a lot of that and just generally speaking, try to have a good time as the Dogs get ready for a game against the Gamecocks coming up on Saturday, and all of us get ready to chomp down on some turkey coming up on Thursday. It's DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. It's presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Dial 678-ESOG now for a solution to your foundation and waterproofing problems.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
At the risk of overselling things, maybe a little too much, I actually believe that Saturday could be a pretty important day for Georgia. The game against South Carolina, if it goes the way that Dog fans hope that it goes, could be a signal that this team has taken an important turned an important corner in terms of establishing the offensive identity that I think a lot of Georgia fans have craved for this program, and frankly, even the program itself has kind of craved for itself. To explain what I mean by this, let me go back to the recent past here just for a moment. If you want to go back and look at the years like, say, 2017 and 2018, I don't think there was any doubt on the part of most Georgia fans that Georgia was one of the best teams in the country. In 2017, Georgia came within an eyelash of winning the national championship. And pushing aside the fact that Georgia had a disappointing loss at the end of that season, the actual truth remains the same, that Georgia was one of the very best teams in the country in 2017. Then you make the transition to 2018, and it's kind of amazing to look back on this now, how many different faces were in place in 2018 compared to 2017. There was no more Nick Chubb and Sony Michel, but the running game with Elijah Holyfield and DeAndre Swift was plenty fine. The passing offense kind of developed a new identity. Jake Fromm probably had his best year in a Georgia uniform in 2018. Guys like McCole Hardman, Riley Ridley, and others kind of came up with some bigger pass plays for Georgia. And in 2018, even with some different faces leading the way for UGA, once again, Georgia, I think, clearly was one of the best teams in the country. You could have made a substantial argument that Georgia at the end of the year was one of the four best, excluded from the college football playoff for reasons that have kind of been hashed out over the years, but legitimately amongst the discussion of one of the four best teams in the country. Then in 2019, I think even the most ardent Georgia fan, even the most intense Georgia partisan would probably say that the 2019 season felt a little bit different. Yes, Georgia won the East again, and yes, Georgia beat almost every team it played, including fun rivalry wins at Auburn to clinch the SEC East, in Jacksonville once again against Florida. I think even Georgia partisans, the people who are the most die-hard believers of UGA, I think a lot of them would say, hey, the record was pretty similar. The opportunity at the end of the year, all goals still intact, pretty similar. But even before Georgia got kind of manhandled by LSU, I think for a lot of Georgia fans, there was the thought of, this team just doesn't quite feel the way 2017, 2018 felt. This just doesn't quite feel like the same kind of team that's the same threat to eventually win the national championship. And I believe that there's one stat in particular that probably points that out more than anything else. I'm going to show this to you on the screen. If you look at how Georgia has played against SEC teams, take out Georgia Tech, take out the random game against Notre Dame, take out the groups of five teams that Georgia's played, take all of that out, just focus on the SEC opponents that Georgia's faced over the course of the last few years. I think you see a very interesting trend and a very interesting dip that trend took in 2019. Let me show this on the screen so folks can see. Let's look at the SEC opponents that Georgia's played in 2017, 2018, 2019, and up until this point in the 2020 season, and look at let's look at the average points that Georgia scored in those games. In 2017, against 10 SEC opponents that season, Georgia averaged 34.6 points per game against only SEC opponents. That's a pretty impressive number given the competition. National championship contender, obviously everybody remembers that. As I said before, in 2018, Georgia's still very much a threat to win the national championship. They may have lost to Alabama in the SEC championship game, but they played them play for play, essentially played them evenly. And the average points per game that year against 9 SEC opponents would speak to Georgia being amongst the best in the country. They averaged 33.8 points per game that year against SEC opponents. Now, if you're watching on video, you see this, radio and podcast, I'll read it to you. Look at the dip that Georgia took in 2019. You go from averaging right there around 34, 35 points a game against SEC foes in 2017 and 2018. In 2019, Georgia averaged just 23.6 points per game against the 9 SEC opponents it faced. It was a huge drop. And it was the backdrop for the start of the 2019 season, or I should say the 2020 season, when we all knew that Georgia would be looking to upgrade its offense. Now, through the first 6 games of this season, there was some evidence that may have happened. 29 points per game. A couple of those are obviously defensive scores, but for the sake of comparison, we've included all the points that Georgia scored here. But this is what made Saturday's game so significant. As I told you going into the game, that if we're going to use kind of 30 points as kind of a magic number, Georgia had that nice 30-plus average in 2017, 2018, dipped way below that in 2019. If we use that sort of 30-plus number as kind of a magic number here, coming into the game on Saturday for Georgia, it had only exceeded 30 points against SEC foes in 2 of its previous 13 games against league competition. And Georgia goes out and scores 31 against South Carolina on Saturday. I should say against Mississippi State on Saturday. It was a big moment for a Georgia offense that hadn't had a lot of big moments in recent years. And now there's the opportunity to do that again this upcoming Saturday against South Carolina. If Georgia can find its way into the 30s again, then I think all of a sudden you're going to say, wow, JT Daniels really has brought about the transformation that you would expect. Or at least he's setting in motion the series of events that can lead to that. This would be something substantial. This would be something that matters. And Kirby Smart, for what it's worth himself, actually talked about this a little bit during his weekly press conference yesterday, that while obviously there are games to play in 2020 and those games do matter, that Georgia is potentially laying a foundation that can make this program also better in 2021 as well. In fact, he used one word in particular to describe what the presence of Daniels could mean for Georgia. I thought this was pretty good. Take a listen to what Smart said about this yesterday.
Yeah, the advantage, I think, would be continuity. I mean, what you're looking for is above-the-line play, high-level play, and that's what we've been searching for really all year. And you're always trying to find at every position who can play above the line and who can play winning football, and that's what we're trying to find. And anytime you get continuity at that position, is it a benefit? Absolutely, it's a benefit. We got to produce more sample size that way and continue to grow that position.
Yeah, I love that at the end there. First of all, the word that Smart uses that I think is really valuable is the word continuity, that Georgia could establish that and could really feel better about itself going to the offseason because of the continuity that it's able to establish right now. I think that matters. But I also like what Smart says there at the end of, hey, we just now need to increase the sample size. You know, we had the nice moment for JT Daniels in his debut. We had that in place. We just need to increase that sample size. We need another data point that reaffirms what we all saw Saturday against Mississippi State. Was this an example of a defense that expected Georgia to run it every single time and Daniels was able to exploit that? Or is this a guy that's ready to kind of go out there and do that again now that a defense has seen him, has film on him, and might be gearing up and ready to stop him? If you look at the point spread, look at the expectations of the game on Saturday, the point spread's right there around 3 touchdowns in Georgia's favor. The over-under's right there around high 40s. So the Vegas folks, the number cruncher folks, are saying that we think this is a game that Georgia can get to 30 again. And back-to-back games of 30-plus points for Georgia against SEC foes would be a pretty significant accomplishment given the fact that, as I told you a moment ago and showed you a moment ago, Georgia had so much trouble finding points against SEC teams going back to 2019. And, of course, all of this is done in the midst of a time in which JT Daniels is not just showing you what he is as a quarterback, but also potentially showing you what he might have the potential to be. And as far as that ceiling and that potential, well, Kirby Smart also talked about that a little bit yesterday as well.
I think with any player that's relatively young in terms of their career, there's always a lot of room for improvement. In terms of his eyes in certain routes, there were a couple things that he had his eyes on the wrong side, but he threw the ball well. He was very accurate. He protected the ball, made good decisions with the ball, and had the one probably errant throw that went off the hands of the defender early in the game, and that may have just come from the rust of not playing. But certainly he can grow and get better. He understands that as well as our other guys. You have to grow and get better in order to move forward, and that's what we all need to do.
So Kirby Smart says that JT Daniels has room for improvement. We all understand that. But Smart also made a pretty crucial point yesterday as well, that when you look at the offense overall, those points per game against SEC opponents, this isn't just about Daniels' room for improvement, but the total offense and where it still has room to grow, especially after what we saw on Saturday, including a pretty crucial point that Smart addressed on Monday. Here's more from him.
I think with any player that's relatively young in terms of their career, there's always a lot of room for improvement.
Connor, I think that may be the same one again. Do we have the one on? Yeah, let's hear that one.
I don't know that you know that right now. You see him make good throws. I think his mobility is not going to do anything but hopefully improve. The people around him got to play well. He's got to get a run game around him to help him in order to reach his full potential and things like that.
So I think that's true, that Smart says, hey, for JT Daniels to be the best that he can be, he has to have a run game to go around him. We all remember that. I was citing the offensive stats from 2017 and 2018. Jake Fromm got better as a quarterback from his first year to his second year. But my gosh, Georgia was running. You had a tandem of running backs in both those years that essentially eclipsed 2,500 yards, rushing between the two of them. The rushing component was a big part of the best Georgia offenses under Kirby Smart. And even in the transition to Todd Monken, we still expect running game to be a big part of what goes on. Georgia at its best will include JT Daniels making the throws that he made on Saturday, you hope, along with a running game that feeds off of that and continues to do some of the things that the best Kirby Smart teams have done thus far. Obviously on Saturday, that was absent. But it's still an opportunity for Georgia this upcoming week to replicate some of what we did see this past Saturday, finding a way to score points, finding a way to get those big passing plays. And if Georgia is in the 30s again, then I think you can say, wow, really there may be some momentum building here for a Georgia offense that feels a little bit more like the best teams in the country and a little bit more of a legitimate conversation going into 2021 during the upcoming offseason about how the Dogs can truly take the next step. But as Smart said, running game was absent on Saturday. How do you bring that back in the future? Well, he had some other interesting things to say about that here this week. We'll touch on all of that. First, let me pause for a moment and introduce the show. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia, and glad to have you with us. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter on video, Apple, Google, Spotify, posting the show at DawgNation.com for the podcast, radio with our friends in Athens, in the Classic City on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. However you get to us today, we are just really glad to have you with us as we head towards a Thanksgiving week, and hope all of you, whether you're enjoying some time off or just continuing with that workday grind, whatever you're doing, thanks for doing it with us here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. And as I said before, big thanks to our friends at ESOG for making all of this possible. They can step up to the plate for you and do great work, provide a solution to your problem if you're dealing with any kind of foundation or waterproofing issues. It's one of the things that they are just well known for. It is the thing that they are well known for. They're also proud partners of UGA, would make them fun to do business with. Good friends of ours here at DawgNation Daily. In this time of year, when you do have friends and family coming over to your house, you notice things that you maybe don't notice. You kind of see things through someone else's eyes. You may see some of those wet spots showing up. Basement, crawl space, garage sometimes, or those cracks in your foundation. Maybe your uncle points it out to you and says, hey, what's going on with this? You know this is a problem, but you haven't done anything about it. Now is the time to take action on getting those foundation waterproofing issues addressed around your house. Engineered Solutions of Georgia can help you with that. They have 2 full-time engineers on staff. You can simply give them a call to find out more. 678-ESOG now. That's 678-ESOG now. That'll get you in touch with my friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia. We're going to get Connor Riley coming up in just a minute here. Before we do that, let's go around the doghouse here today, delivered by Marco's Pizza. And as I said before, Georgia has a chance to take another big step offensively on Saturday. Scored 30 points against Mississippi State. Can Georgia replicate that with another 30-plus point performance against South Carolina, it would be a strong indication that not only is JT Daniels the quarterback that can give the Dogs some continuity, but the offense itself may be finding some life, something that has been desperately needed around this program. But obviously before that, you have to also make sure, as Smart just said a moment ago, that you've got the running game to complement what Daniels is doing through the air right now. And so I want to spend some more time kind of focusing on exactly what that means, exactly how you get better performance than what you had from really kind of the anemic effort from the Georgia rushing attack on Saturday and some problems with the offensive line. One of the things that some of you have mentioned in our comment sections on both Facebook and YouTube, and somebody even mentioned this to me on Twitter at DawgNation Daily, hey, given the fact that Daniels is a new quarterback, given the fact that we've heard, going back to the Jake Fromm era, how important it is to be able to check into the right running play and making sure you're reading that defense correctly. A lot of you have kind of asked about that. Smart did address the freedom that Daniels have to change those plays in the line of scrimmage, the comfort he has with reading those defenses in his first start in a Georgia uniform here in the SEC. Smart kind of downplaying that being a concern as to why the running game didn't really get off against Mississippi State. Here is Smart on that topic.
I had the same game plans we really had with the other quarterbacks in terms of, I think everybody likes to make a big deal, especially in the media profession, of how much is quarterback control and how much is offensive court. The game plan is set up to where you have run checks, you have pass checks, you have flexibility on protections to redirect things. Nobody really is different in college football in terms of that. Some quarterbacks can handle more than others, and JT is not going to be – we're not going to be limited by what JT can do. We'll be limited by what we can do with our offensive line, our tight ends, our receivers, and backs, because for everything you do with JT, they have to be able to do as well. And you can't rep 100 different checks every week. So JT understands our system. He's got flexibility to do some things in certain calls, and then in other calls he doesn't.
So Smart kind of downplays any kind of impact that Daniels' first start might have had on the absence of a running game, but he did not hold back, though, in really some pretty pointed criticism of the Georgia offensive line. Here's more from Kirby.
I wouldn't say there's very often times that we missed a block. I would say whipped or beaten a lot of times. It's not like we didn't have a hat for a hat in some instances. Most of the time, as always is the case in the run game, you got one receiver that's got to go get one of their hats, and that makes you even. But when you bring the receiver, that brings another defender. So they're always going to have a little bit of an advantage, especially when they play us. But that doesn't matter. Everybody we've played has been that way. The difference has been their movement inside and some of the stunts they ran to murky the picture up, kind of make it unclear and slanting and angling guys. And we didn't do a good job handling their movement more than anything else.
At the risk of oversimplifying this, though, I do want to say that I'm not as worried about this, speaking as someone who obviously wants Georgia to win. I'm not as worried about this as maybe some fans might be. Certainly some of the questions that have popped up in our comment section would suggest that the absence of the running game was a pretty big deal for a lot of UGA fans on Saturday. The reason why I'm not is because I do see a pretty simple pathway for all of this to get better beyond just the unique aspects of Mississippi State's defense going back to Saturday. And once again, this will be the final clip we hear from Smart on this. Smart himself kind of also pointed towards that path forward for how in 2020 running game gets better. Here's one more from Kirby.
You just got to be creative in the run game. When people play you like Mississippi State plays you, it's, you got to be patient, creative. You got to throw. So, there's things we can improve on, most certainly, always is. But you're not going to see a lot of teams rushing for a lot of yards against those guys if they're playing the same way they played against us.
I think Smart's 100% right about that, regardless of what may be true for the Mississippi State's defense. This isn't 3 yards in a cloud of dust football anymore. That's just not the way things go. Smart says if you want the running game to be as good as it can be, when you face those very, crowded boxes, when you face those linebackers maybe creeping up the line of scrimmage or whatever the defensive line might be doing, you simply have to punish a defense by throwing over top of it so that you can soften it up to create more opportunities to the run game later on. And Mississippi State had every right to come into the game on Saturday simply not expecting Georgia to be able to do that, because even with what was largely anticipated to be a new starting quarterback, Georgia had not done this kind of stuff against anybody for really the last couple of years. So Mississippi State played defense against Georgia on the basis of what it had seen from UGA in the past. But all of a sudden, Georgia showed the world that it's now capable maybe of doing more than just running the football. It's now capable of punishing a defense through a passing attack as well. And now that faces that puts defenses facing a choice, maybe with South Carolina this Saturday. Do you have to soften up your run box so that you can deal with the Georgia passing attack? Well, if that's the way that things continue to go and JT Daniels continues to put pressure on these defenses by what he's doing through the air, then all of a sudden the Georgia running game, I believe, is going to be just fine after that. It's Around the Doghouse. It's delivered today by our friends at Marco's Pizza. It's America's most beloved pizza because it's real, authentic pizza made the Italian way. It's also, contactless, touchless. It's baked in a 450-degree oven. It means we're all thinking about our health and safety right now. Marco's Pizza working really hard to make sure they take good care of you on that. Also, for some of you, you love pizza. You don't necessarily want the crust sometimes. Marco's got these pizza bowls now, which gives you all the great flavor without the crust. That's a really fun thing. And you can get a great deal right now. I've told you before about these great large specialty pizzas. Well, you can get one of those and a large 2-topping pizza for just $23.99. Great deal, great savings. You head back towards the weekend or here heading towards Thanksgiving, got some folks over. You want to feed them in a nice way, make them taste good, but also good on the wallet as well. Marco's Pizza is great on that. Marco's app or Marcos.com, the best way to set yourself up to get the Marco's Pizza right there at your doorstep. Really good stuff. We appreciate them delivering Around the Doghouse to us here today. All right, we've got a lot to do on today's show. We'll preview what is a very busy weekend around college football in and out of the SEC as we head towards the Thanksgiving weekend. There's also some drama in a couple of spots. We'll touch on some of that. It'll probably take us a couple of days, actually, to get through all the drama that's out there in college football right now, but we'll cover it all. For now, though, on what's next for JT Daniels, what's next for the Georgia offense, in a little bit of a revenge game against South Carolina. Let's talk all about this with our buddy Connor Riley here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
I'll bring in Connor Riley here. Great coverage he had over the weekend at DawgNation.com. Also really interesting stuff looking at the Kirby Smart press conference yesterday. The players got a chance to speak. That was all great to hear as Georgia looks to get back on the road on Saturday, heading to Columbia against those South Carolina Gamecocks. And, Connor, there was some good and some not so good from Georgia on Saturday. It seems like the mood of the fans is a lot more interested in celebrating the good, what happened with the passing attack, more so than lamenting the bad, the fact that Georgia did not really rush for really anything at all. And to me, that's totally understandable. Georgia can always find a way to get more running game. I think using the passing attack is the way to do that. But Georgia has found throwing the football to be very difficult over the course of the last season and a half. The fact that Georgia did that well on Saturday, I do think is a pretty significant, potential, turning the corner moment for UGA. And if they can replicate some of that on Saturday, I think that's a pretty big statement to the rest of college football. Do you agree?
I don't know about the rest of college football. It's a South Carolina team that struggled defensively, and really Georgia needs to go out and show that it can beat up on these lesser teams and then go out and show that it can do it against a Florida and an Alabama where they're throwing for 300-plus yards. But you got to do it against the lesser opponents. You got to do it against a Mississippi State. You got to do it against a South Carolina. And the word that we've talked about here and Karis Jackson actually used in his interview on Saturday after the game was fun.
Yeah.
The passing offense on Saturday was fun. Now, not much else about the Georgia team on Saturday was fun, but for those 60 minutes with JT Daniels at quarterback, the passing offense as a whole was fun.
Yeah, to be clear, the reason why I think that Georgia has a chance to send a message is because they haven't done this against anyone. It's not been opponent specific. It's not been dictated by who you've been playing. Georgia against SEC competition up until Saturday had just not been putting up very many points at all. So the fact that it happened against Mississippi State, if it could happen again, 2 consecutive weeks of 30-plus points, I'd take that as a big sign. Not a sign that Georgia's ready to go out there and beat Alabama the very following week. You got to take one step at a time. But it would be a significant step nonetheless to say, all of a sudden, this thing that Georgia's been missing, maybe they really do have that now.
Yeah, so I want to see both in continued improvement from the passing game, not necessarily 400 yards, 4 touchdowns, but from when they want to do it, they can hit those explosive plays. They don't need to wait to third down to do it. They can do it on first and second down. They can make those big-time throws that JT Daniels made. while also having an effective run game because it was the worst rushing effort since 1996 when Kirby Smart was a player at Georgia. So a more balanced offensive attack, I think that helps. As for getting college football's attention this season and saying, hey, maybe we were all wrong about Georgia, I think that ship has sailed. Georgia is what Georgia is this season. But going forward into 2021 and the point Kirby Smart made about continuity, if Daniels comes back, you bring all these receivers back, it sets up to where Georgia's offense could potentially be in a really great spot at the start of the 2021 season.
Yeah, I think, with the running game, for the most part, speaking as someone who obviously wants Georgia to win, I'm not that worried about that coming off of Saturday. Georgia needs a running game, but I am firmly of the belief that when defenses don't respect Georgia's ability to throw the ball, it becomes much easier to stop the rushing attack. And now Kirby Smart spoke about some specific things from a technical standpoint that Mississippi State's defense was doing. That stuff notwithstanding, there also seemed to be a lot of folks just kind of standing near the line of scrimmage. Not necessarily at the line, but standing near the line of scrimmage, especially on early downs. It's just hard to run the ball in that situation. But if Daniels is going to be delivering the ball the way that he did on Saturday, moving the chains, by the way, that gives you more chance to run because you get a chance to run more plays because you're not getting off the field on fourth down in those instances. Then all of a sudden, I think it just all falls into place. The very best teams in college football, best quarterbacks, best passing attacks, they have seemingly found a way to also run the football too because the defense is always just kind of made to guess wrong. Georgia, its path towards better rushing attack, I do believe, is to increase the passing attack.
Yeah, for me right now, the biggest difference between Alabama and Florida, two very, very good offenses that in all likelihood will see each other in Atlanta on December 19th. The difference is Alabama can run the ball when it wants to, whereas Florida really can't, which is why I think a lot more people, and obviously Florida has lost to Texas A&M, but the reason Alabama is the runaway title favorite right now is because Alabama, in addition to having those explosive plays, they can run the ball. I think what I'm most looking forward to this Saturday is, yes, can Georgia hit those passing plays again where if you, like Mississippi State did, just say, we're going to take away your running game, which to give them credit, they absolutely did that. Georgia's pretty clearly shown they have the athletes on the outside to win one-on-one coverage, to win those one-on-one 50-50 ball situations. And now they've got a quarterback that can make those layup throws that Kirby Smart spoke about so much a week ago.
What happened with the wide receivers on Saturday, the development of George Pickens, he comes within an eyelash of setting the school record for most receiving yards in a single game. It was great to see George Pickens back after battling with injury for a couple of weeks. And I've said this in the show many times. Some people care about the stat guy, some people don't. The one thing they've been pretty consistent in saying, though, the analytics-minded type people is that experience at the wide receiver position is just as important as experience at the quarterback position. And for the last couple of years for Georgia, this season, 2019, we have started a year in which Georgia knew that it didn't seemingly have the requisite experience at receiver to truly feel like it could be one of the nation's best offenses. That could be different in 2021. This is one of the reasons why that Georgia's doing more than just playing at the string right now. Saturday was a day not just to showcase what JT Daniels has the ability to do, but to really put a position where elite recruiting win like Jermaine Burton, all of a sudden he's more than just flashy prospect with potential. He actually has a chance to go into 2021 as a wide receiver with some seasoning. George Pickens as a junior is more than just this young guy that you're excited about. He all of a sudden, next season becomes a guy that really has been around a lot, caught a lot of balls, played a lot in the SEC. To say nothing of some of the other guys that you can also say that about. Kearis Jackson, very much the same way. Jackson's become a real live receiver here this year. This experience matters for him next season. That returning production at receiver is just as predictive as returning success at the quarterback position, that continuity that Kirby Smart described. I love the possibility of that for the rest of this year. It's one of the reasons why I'm going to be watching these games so closely. Every throw to Jackson, every throw to Burton, every throw to Pickens, that's all bedrock foundation for what can help this team next year.
Yeah, I know Terrence Edwards disagrees, but I wrote a story this morning where the emergence of JT Daniels shows that wide receiver, which certainly in 2019, and I think you could definitely say in the early parts of 2020, has been a weakness. You look at the Alabama game when Kearis Jackson got taken away, Georgia's receivers struggled to make plays. Kentucky, Georgia's wide receivers combined for 4 catches for 36 yards. That's just not good enough at an SEC level. So what they did on Saturday was, to me, just as eye-opening as what Daniels did, because Jackson Burton, Pickens, and then the 3 injured receivers that they also stand to get back next year. And Arian Smith might come back this year, but then Marcus Rosemary-Jacksaint and Dominic Blaylock as well. Those are all top 150 recruits nationally. Those are guys that have talent, that have skills to go play at other big-time programs. Maybe not necessarily Jackson, but the first 5 there as well. So the talent is there, and now you're starting to see that production that you point out is such a key sort of indicator of success. So you have that meshed with Daniels. If they continue to play well, and again, it's the simple stuff. A lot of the stuff, they weren't necessarily always making spectacular catches, but they made the easy ones. Jermaine Burton's 2 touchdowns, those were catches where he went up and made a play. And to have a wide receiver, and now what looks like potentially multiple wide receivers, they're able to do that. Your offense starts looking closer and closer to what Alabama has, to what Clemson has, to what LSU had a season ago.
Yeah, I just don't think people realize, unless you really follow it closely, how many years Georgia went without signing the elite receiver from a measurable recruiting standpoint. That changed for Georgia in 2019. That changed for Georgia in 2020, where Georgia was – you're flipping Burton from LSU. You're flipping George Pickens from Auburn. You're winning big recruiting battles to bring these guys in. But because experience matters as much as it does at receiver, it's not an instantaneous transformation. What you do in 2019 benefits you more in 2021 than it does in 2019 and 2020. The same thing for the 2020 class. There's a little bit of a lag time to really see the benefit of that. But the work that Georgia has done in those spots does give you a chance to make. We assume it's not going to be JT Daniels in the way that he played on Saturday, but whoever your starting quarterback would be in 2021 would have a more of a chance to succeed than the guy starting the 2020 season, because all of a sudden the crop of receivers, when you read those magazines, and I love reading those preseason magazines, top 10 receiving groups, top 10 running back groups, all those things. When you read that stuff for the 2021 season, you're going to see the Georgia wide receiver group show up on those lists of best, receiver position groups in the country. It's been a long time. I mean, I can't even imagine how long it's been since we've seen that group show up on a list like that before the start of the season.
I mean, maybe the 2008 group when I think Muhammad Massaquoi was still there, and you had a freshman in A.J. Green. It's been a long time since you've seen that level of talent and that level of potential. And again, that's the word you still use here because it is just one game, as great as it was. So that's why the South Carolina game on Saturday is so important, because if it doesn't have to statistically look like it did, but hitting the big plays, showing that they can win on one-on-one coverage, because the South Carolina team, this defense has struggled. New interim head coach. They're going to be without their top 2 corners that really gave Georgia problems last year in J.C. Horn and Israel Mukwamu. So, again, just go out and do it again on Saturday and look impressive and look like a capable, functioning passing offense.
And I know people are going to say, well, what about 2018? Georgia had a number of receivers that got drafted off that group. Even though the overall story for Georgia offensively in 2018 was really pretty good, I think in retrospect, there was talent that didn't get used as well as it could. No one from that group, including McCole Hardman, who's turned out to be a terrific NFL player, no one from that group exceeded 600 yards receiving that season when best receivers in the country are finding that 1,000-yard mark, things like that, that even though Georgia had some pros as receivers in 2018, the overall level of production wasn't as high then as I think it has the potential to be with a Todd Monken offense the rest of this season and into 2021, at least measured by the actual stats that get produced.
I would say that the parts from this 2020 and potentially 2021 offense are a little bit better at the wide receiver position than the 2018 one, but you've also got a much better driver and engine in Todd Monken, the offensive coordinator and play call, and then JT Daniels, the one who's going out there and making those throws than you did in that 2018 season.
We talked running game a minute ago. I do want to focus on the other thing that kind of showed up from Saturday, which is the defense. I'm going to date myself the reference here. Before there was American Idol, I was a kid, there was a show called Star Search. Ed McMahon was the host. This is a very 80s type thing to be talking about here. But it's basically like the American Idol before American Idol wasn't nearly as popular. It was on during the day. It's like a syndicated show. But when I think about that phrase, Star Search, that to me is what this Georgia defense has to be on right now. That when you think about kind of a game against Mississippi State where, I never really thought Georgia was going to lose the game necessarily, but you weren't quite getting those stops the way that you wanted to. And clearly there were some moments in which, the Florida offense got what it wanted, the Alabama offense got what it wanted. This Georgia defense, which is filled with good players, I think you've got to go on that star search to find the guy who's going to be your Roquan and just get you off the field when you have to get off the field. Jermaine Johnson may be getting close to that. There are a lot of guys, frankly, on this defense who I think are close to that. When LeCount was healthy and playing, he's obviously very close to that. Jordan Davis, I believe, is virtually an indispensable player. It's one of the reasons why it's been tough for Georgia to play without him. But I do think there's that absence of star on the Georgia defense right now, and I think that shows up in some of the games where the defensive performance may leave a little something to be desired. Do you agree?
I think Georgia had its star, and he's just not playing right now, and that was Richard LeCount. Mm-hmm. And I think the biggest thing I think you can individually point to is look at what Florida did. Look at what Mississippi State did. They were attacking the middle of the field, Mississippi State, and they were sort of doing the underneath stuff where if you have a safety there who's able to break on the ball and sort of attack the ball and sort of take away those short passes, that just makes everything easier. And that's what LeCount was doing this year. And to not have him out there, I think there's certainly some communication issues. We saw that Monty Rice and Monty Rice and Mark Webber sort of yelling at each other during a play last year. Just everything that LeCount brought in terms of both his playmaking, but also the veteran presence, the communication, everything, and the way he was playing. I mean, the last week he played against Kentucky, 13 tackles, fumble recovery. He was the National Defensive Player of the Week, along with the SEC Defensive Player of the Week. Was doing the sort of things that stars, as you point out, do. They had that 2020 star, and then he just unfortunately got hurt. Now he might come back potentially for the Vanderbilt game, potentially for whenever that Missouri game gets made up. But so to your sort of point, we talk about 2021 so much. Who's going to be that guy in 2021? Is it going to be a Lewis Seen? Is it going to be a Nakobe Dean? Who is going to be that sort of star player that we see? Because and the thing with Roquan that we've talked so much about, you could see he was on that star track potential when he had a very good, strong breakout sophomore season.
Yeah.
So who is the guy, and I would mention here Dean and Seen are both sophomores, who is the guy on this Georgia defense right now that uses these last however many games to sort of turn a corner a bit and say, hey, I'm going to be a guy who's going to be a major factor for this team next season?
And I would say, and I've said this before, to make a baseball comparison for a moment, I'm a baseball fan. I'd love to have an all-star catcher, but, man, I'd really love to have an all-star center fielder. There's just a little bit different type of thing when, you got the best center fielder compared to the best catcher. Mm-hmm. I think there's also some of that with defense in college football too. Richard LeCount's going to go down as one of the great players in recent Georgia history, well-deserved accolades that he's going to get at the end of his career here. However, if you told me the superstar is someone in the front seven as opposed to someone in the secondary, sight unseen, I'm going to tell you that's better for defenses because that's a guy lining up closer to the football, and therefore that's someone who has the immediate opportunity to be more impactful. So I don't discount LeCount's sort of star status. I think you're right to say that. Mm-hmm. I think there's additional value when you've got someone like Roquan was that's in that front seven just a little closer to where the action is.
Yeah, and I would just mention here, Eric Stokes has been phenomenal this year as well. The problem, and to your sort of point, the all-star catch-up point, when you're a cornerback, you're not necessarily – Eric Stokes probably does his job perfectly 95% of the time. And when you do that, the quarterbacks will all right, I'm just not going to throw at you. I'm going to look to the other side of the field and try to exploit your mismatches over there, whereas – watching the Tampa Bay Los Angeles Rams game last night, Aaron Donald didn't have a sack, but just his presence and knowing where trying to know where he was and the pressure that he was creating clearly affected Tom Brady, even when the pressure wasn't necessarily getting there. So having a player like that in your front seven, and I'm not saying anyone is going to be Aaron Donald, he's a one-of-one player in the world, but having a type of player like that who you have to know where he is and he is affecting the quarterback's thinking and actual performance on every play is a huge benefit to any defense.
Yeah, I think that's true. Let me finish with this. For some reason, I think that Mike Bobo is a really fascinating figure. Interim coach for South Carolina on Saturday. Obviously, he and Kirby Smart are good friends. Media always makes a big deal about these relationships when coaches know each other. Kirby goes out of his way to downplay all of that. But that's not the only thing I find fascinating about Bobo. His record at Georgia is one of those things that still gets debated. I think he was a very good offensive coordinator. He was the subject of a lot of criticism while he was here. I think most of that's just common to offensive coordinators, but some of that has seemingly lingered with Bobo. His transition to a head coach probably didn't go very well. But I still think of him as a really good offensive mind. It hasn't really happened for him at South Carolina, admittedly. What do you make of Mike Bobo's presence in this game on Saturday? Is that interesting to you?
Yeah, I am admittedly a Bobo sympathizer, and I was covering that 2014 team. I was around them. I was a freshman and sophomore in college on the 2012 and 2013, where the offense wasn't the issue that year. And granted, I was not the biggest Georgia fan early on in Bobo's tenure, and the internet has forever and will for always be unkind to the Georgia offensive coordinator, and specifically with Bobo, it always felt a little bit more virtual or more intense hatred, and maybe that might be just because he is a Georgia guy and he's from the state, Thomasville 229. He played quarterback here, and you sort of want him to do a little bit more. I think it's going to be really interesting. I kind of actually wish this game had been at Georgia just to sort of see what it would be like from his perspective. Ultimately, I don't think he's going to be the head coach at South Carolina. I don't know what his future holds, but he's a guy who is Georgia through and through, is overall, from my interactions with him, a pretty nice guy. I think he's an incredible offensive talent. That 2014 team with Hudson Mason scored 40 points a game, which is just an incredible mark. Yep. And he got the most out of Todd Gurley that year. He got the most out of Nick Chubb that year.
Except for the goal line at South Carolina.
I don't want to talk.
Honesty compels me to admit.
They also scored 35 points in that game.
Yeah, listen, I'm a Bobo fan. I'm just saying that that one sticks in the crotch.
Look, you score 35 points, you should win a game. And no one wants to talk about how Georgia's defense played that day with a certain Florida defensive coordinator who is now employed there. So I'm interested for him. I generally root for Bobo. I wish he had more success at Colorado State. I don't think he's going to have a whole lot of fun on Saturday, but spinning it forward into the future, I hope that most Georgia fans want to see a guy like Bobo have success somewhere.
So I really make a pretty concerted effort not to talk a lot about unsubstantiated rumors. But obviously one of the lingering rumors with Bobo is that he has bad blood for the way that he was treated at Georgia. Do you believe that's true? Do you believe that, for instance, Bobo had a choice of, where to work this season, that maybe he wanted to go to South Carolina because he didn't feel like coming back to Georgia at this point in his career? I don't even really know, but do you think there's a chance that's true?
I don't know if it's true, but I don't blame Bobo at all if it was. I think he'd been so wrongly criticized, lambasted, and granted,
he was underpaid.
Exactly. Yeah.
More importantly, he was just underpaid.
Yeah, Bobo was one of the best offensive coordinators in the country, and he was never treated like that at Georgia for whatever reasons. And I think just a bad first impression. So many people forever wrote him off and didn't give him a chance to realize, oh wait, this guy can get better as a coach, and he absolutely did that in his time at Georgia. So I don't know if he feels that way, but seeing how he's treated online and in certain aspects of this fan base, I have no issue with him if that's the way he chose to feel.
And just very quickly, I know you and I have talked about this before, if Bobo gets the money he deserves, maybe he doesn't take the Colorado State job. In retrospect, maybe people just want to be a head coach, but he was certainly not making the $1 million+ other people made. Brian Schottenheimer comes in 2015. I think he gets $900,000+. That's the money that Bobo should have been getting already. Schottenheimer's a disaster. That's the last year of Rick. A lot of things factored into that. Bobo is also one of these pivotal figures for Georgia. That things go a little bit different. All the stuff that we've enjoyed the last few years, there's a chance that none of that happens because of the dominoes just falling in a different direction.
Yeah, if Mike Bobo is still the offensive coordinator at Georgia in 2015, that team is much, much better. I don't know how much better. I don't know if it's enough to save Mark Richt long term, but that Georgia program is in a very different spot in 2015 if Bobo's still there.
Might have at least saved him from a big decision in Jacksonville. But that's enough walking down bad memory lane. Connor, thanks for your time. We appreciate you being here.
Yep, as always, it was a pleasure.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
I think Bobo on the side Saturday for South Carolina is a lot of fun. I will say I'm a big fan of his. Obviously, I can't root for him against Georgia, but professional success for Bobo, I do because of all the things that Connor just mentioned. This is a guy who, and there are a lot of these guys at Georgia. I do think we forget how good of a player Bobo was. Very good quarterback for Georgia in 1997. You talk about what-if scenarios. If Bobo and Robert Edwards, those guys don't get hurt in 1995, you think Ray Goff would have loved to have had a healthy Bobo for a full season? There's a lot of that kind of stuff for sure. We'll put a pin in that for now. We'll get into our SEC through here. By the way, heading towards the weekend, you got a lot of folks coming into your house for Thanksgiving. You want to have a good time with them. One of the best ways to show them a good time is to show them some Classic City Lager from Creature Comforts Brewing Company. It's a taste of Athens. Maybe you've got folks from, all around the country coming back home for Thanksgiving. They haven't had a little taste of Athens in a while. Give them some Classic City Lager. It's good cold beer. It's a lager-style beer, lighter tasting, but still great flavor. It's available in 6 and 12-pack cans all year round. It's a Classic City Lager from Creature Comforts Brewing Company. Make sure you check that out today. All right, let's roll through here with our SEC through. Let me start with this. There's been a little bit of attention paid to the SEC schedule change that got announced yesterday, and I think that some people misunderstood something that I said on social media, so I'll try to clear myself up on that a little bit. Let me see if I can, though, at first explain the schedule changes that have taken place. Arkansas has some coronavirus stuff, so their game against Missouri needed to be postponed for now. SEC stepped in quickly to take Vanderbilt away from Tennessee, the rivalry game that's supposed to take place on Saturday. Put Vanderbilt against Missouri, a game that's supposed to take place later, now gets moved up. Now, some people on the internet took this as a diss of Tennessee, that the league was saying that Missouri-Vanderbilt was more important than Tennessee-Vanderbilt. That's not my understanding the case. This decision was made because by moving the chess pieces around this way, it still gives the SEC a chance to preserve all 10 games for every one of its league teams. Let me tell you something. That matters. That's a big deal. There were a lot of people who said this could not happen. I think there were a lot of key figures around the world of college football conspiring to keep this from happening. If the SEC plays all 10 of its games, even though there have been some shifts around and some postponements, things like that, if the SEC gets in all 10, it's a smashing success and a great job by Commissioner Greg Sankey. I think there's a scenario where playing even fewer than 10 could be viewed as a smashing success, but the SEC made the move it made here, postponing Tennessee-Vanderbilt, because it opens the door for all 10 league games to eventually be played. Now, there's also the question here of what does this mean for Georgia? Because as you move things around, Georgia now looks at 2 potential open dates for Missouri. That's the one game that Georgia has that doesn't currently have a date because it got postponed 2 weeks ago. You have either December 12th, December 19th. Now, because the Vanderbilt-Missouri game got moved off December 12th, my guess is that Georgia-Missouri may slide into there. What I said, I think I said this to Connor on Twitter yesterday, is since Georgia's technically alive in the SEC race, East race, they don't want to put them on December 19th until they're mathematically eliminated. Some people took that to mean that I thought Georgia was still going to win the East. That's not quite what I'm meaning. I'm just meaning that, playing it safe, the league would probably try to schedule Georgia on the 12th if they possibly could. So that's probably confusing, but that's kind of where things stand now. Missouri, Arkansas postponed for this week. Tennessee's game against Vanderbilt was also postponed to kind of move the schedule pieces around, throw Missouri, Vanderbilt together now, leaving 2 dates open for Georgia to potentially play Missouri, and, of course, Vanderbilt, Tennessee. Neither of those teams are open for the SEC East, so you can kind of move that game around wherever you want to, eventually December the 19th if you have to. So that's the story on all of that. Couple of other things here. If you follow the coaching rumors, I love those. There's been a fun one around the South Carolina program as of late that seems to maybe now have had kind of the fire put out on it, that maybe the Gamecocks were in the market for not Todd Monken, Jeff Monken, the Army coach here. And the thought was the university president who has a tie to West Point, that maybe he was pushing for this. That fire got put out pretty quickly. It erupted and then disappeared almost as fast as it started. Sometimes programs do this kind of thing as a smokescreen to maybe make you eventually feel a little more excited about the guy they eventually do hire. Obviously, a lot of South Carolina fans didn't love the idea of, triple option, service academy style football coming to South Carolina. It'd obviously be a very difficult recruiting challenge. So maybe South Carolina is having to move on to like a plan B, plan C type coaching option here. Not the Hugh Freezes of the world, not the Billy Napiers of the world, kind of those A-class candidates. But in comparison to Jeff Monken from Army, at least it seems better than that. Maybe that's what's gone on there with the Gamecocks. But as someone who loves coaching rumors, this was a pretty fun one to follow. By the way, speaking of fun stuff to follow, the ongoing battle between Clemson, and specifically its coach Dabo Swinney in Florida State, has been very fascinating to me. Swinney kept this going again on Monday night when he did his weekly radio show, essentially continuing the rant about it essentially being a forfeit for Florida State after Clemson traveled to Tallahassee, was told that Florida State would not play the game because Clemson had a positive test. What Swinney says, and I have no idea if this is true or not, but this is Swinney's take, is that Pitt went to Florida State, also had a positive test, and Florida State chose to play that game. Now, I think it's really clear to point this out when it comes to the Florida State issue at the moment here. No one is criticizing Mike Norvell, the new Florida State coach, for this. In fact, Norvell has been pretty classy about all of this, saying if Clemson will come back, I'll pay part of the money to do this. The Florida State players seem to want to play the game. The Florida State coaches seem to want to play the game. This all seems to be what I would describe as an institutional failing on the part of Florida State as an athletic program. And by the way, that's not the first time that kind of stuff has been uttered. There was a pretty damning report by ESPN a few days ago about just how weird things have been in Tallahassee. And I think there's a kind of inside baseball thing at Florida State to blame a lot of this on Jimbo Fisher and the culture that he cultivated there at his time. But listen, Jimbo's been gone from Florida State for a long time. Things haven't gotten much better. Jimbo seems to be doing just fine in College Station right now. So who do you think won that divorce? It seems a little bit difficult at this point in time for Florida State to still blame things on Fisher. However, here's the reason why I bring this up on this show. If you're a Georgia fan, you do not want Florida's in-state rival to not be able to put its shoes on the right feet. You just don't want that. Fumbling and bumbling and getting games postponed against Clemson, whatever else has been going on here. They've had a ton of opt-outs, does not seem to be a lot of fan interest in Tallahassee right now. If you're a Georgia fan, I think you probably need to be a little bit of a Florida State fan, that they can at least figure out how to stand up straight and be a little bit of a threat to Florida right now in-state when it comes to recruiting and everything else. Now, Miami has kind of seemingly emerged here under Manny Diaz, both on the field and to a degree in recruiting, so that helps things a little bit. But you don't want Florida to be able to be the only flagship institution in the Sunshine State who's really got things kind of figured out right now. It'd just be a lot easier for them to build momentum that way. So kind of keep that in mind here a little bit. Let's go ahead and do this. It's our MyBookie Best Bets now. It is a busy weekend of college football. Let's go ahead and preview a lot of this, including the changes, how they impact the point spread, Georgia itself, and also some big games outside the SEC with a Black Friday kind of fun stuff here. It's our MyBookie Best Bets. Let's take a look at a few of those here right now, including Georgia at South Carolina. Dogs 21.5-point favorite there on the road. At the time of, as they say in the industry, at press time, we didn't know the Vanderbilt-Missouri line. I believe that's now Missouri minus 20 against Vanderbilt. So keep that in mind there. Florida hosts Kentucky minus 23.5. I'm actually pretty fascinated by Florida and Kentucky because Gators did not cover last week against Vanderbilt. They're eager for a better bounce-back game. Kentucky had 63 hung on them by Alabama. They're eager to play better. With the point spread in mind, Kentucky at Florida is actually a pretty fun game on Saturday. Of course, we all remember Kentucky getting the win in Gainesville the last time they played there back in 2018. So there's a little bit of juice around Kentucky at Florida, I believe, on Saturday. Auburn, Alabama, Iron Bowl. Fun to think about that. Bama is a big favorite, though, as 24-point favorites there. Mississippi State at Ole Miss. Weird to see the Egg Bowl on a Saturday. That is where it is this year. It is the most intense rivalry in the SEC. Not the best, most prestigious rivalry. It is Jerry Springer on grass when it comes to these two schools getting together. I cannot wait for that one on Saturday. Also, nice bad blood between LSU and Texas A&M. Aggies 14-point favorite here. Big-time revenge game after a fight a couple years ago. LSU kind of talked a lot of trash before last year's game. Probably a good bit of juice around that game, something to consider there too. On Friday, you got two games featuring ranked opponents. Iowa State's at Texas. Texas is a 1.5-point favorite there. And Notre Dame's at North Carolina. Also on Friday, a chance for the Irish to kind of prove what they're all about against a Notre Dame team back in the, a North Carolina team back in the AP Top 25 this week. So two pretty fun Black Friday games. It is our MyBookie Best Bets. Make sure you head over to MyBookie and get some skin in the game and have some great time with all the stuff they've got going on, including some really fun stuff with the Turkey Day free play. Here's how this is going to work. You can bet up to $250 on a bet there with MyBookie. If you win, congratulations. That money goes back in your account. If you lose the bet, they're essentially going to give you a free play and put that money back into your account. It's a really fun thing that MyBookie's doing. They're also going to continue to give you that 50% deposit bonus when you check that out. That means if you put $200 in your account to start, they're going to give you $100 to before you even make your first bet, place your first wager. So fun stuff with MyBookie, but make sure you take advantage as we head towards Thanksgiving, the MyBookie Turkey Day free play. This is a really fun thing that they are doing for you here in honor of the Thanksgiving action, all the great stuff with the NFL on Thanksgiving and everything else. Check that out with MyBookie. Just simply type into your browser, and then the internet will do the work for you. MyBookie. Use the promo code DawgNation if you want to take advantage of the Turkey Day free play. If you want to get the 50% deposit bonus when you first sign up, make sure you use the promo code DawgNation to take care of all of that. There we go. So I want to give you an update on this as we get ready to head out the door here today as well. So here's our schedule for the rest of the week. DawgNation Daily like normal tomorrow, as per usual. On Thanksgiving Day, we will take the day off so that the folks who put the show on the air each and every day can spend time with their family and friends, socially distanced, of course, 6 feet apart, whatever else, Zoom, whatever else they want to do. But we're going to give them some time to be off and enjoy all of that. Then we'll be back on Friday. It will be a pre-recorded show because a lot of folks are out of town, things like that. So we will be here for you 10 a.m. on Friday, but it will be a pre-recorded show. All of the other stuff, DawgNation Happy Hour will be, where you've come to expect. Go with the flow, be where you've kind of come to expect. So we'll have a lot of that kind of stuff, but a lot of it is pre-recorded this week as we head towards Thanksgiving. Then, of course, it all leads up to a big day of live coverage from Columbia on Saturday. So stay with us for all of that. And we'll see you tomorrow right back here on DawgNation Daily, presented by ESOG. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. We appreciate all of you being with us here for today's program, and we'll look forward to getting some of your comments here as well. And of course, remind you that R.S. Andrews, you can trust them for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They will take good care of you. If you worry about having folks over and maybe the water heater goes out, don't forget R.S. Andrews. If you've got that emergency situation, they can, in many cases, replace it for you the same day, but you need to find them online at rsandrews.com, and they'll get you covered on all of that. So today is a day in which we're pre-recording some of the stuff that I talked to you about a moment ago, so we don't have a ton of time for comments today, but we will try to knock out a few here and have some fun with that. Let me go to YouTube first because I started on Facebook yesterday. So we'll go to YouTube first. We'll take a few, and then we'll be off and running here on a Tuesday and allowing you to do the same thing. All right, over here on the YouTube side. Noah Sheldon says Florida is average and nothing special. I'm not sure if that's true, but I enjoy the Florida slander nonetheless. Frank Patterson brings up an interesting point. He says the defensive star we're all looking for, I think, is Ringo, Champ Bailey-ish. Yeah, there's a lot of excitement about seeing Kelee Ringo, and you're right. That could be that guy. And by the way, for Georgia, we don't quite know yet from the secondary who's going to choose to return, who's going to choose to move on to the NFL. We're not quite sure about that yet, but obviously there's a scenario in which Georgia could really need some secondary guys to step up next season, and Kelee Ringo would be a great option there. I think the good news for the Georgia defense is, even though I would say that we haven't quite seen that real game wrecker emerge, certainly in the front seven the way that you would hope to, there's no shortage of options. And saying that someone hasn't yet become a superstar is not the same thing as saying they haven't been playing well. I don't think that you can really point to very many individual names on the Georgia defense and say that person hasn't done his job. They are, as I guess a phrase that Smart used in his press conference yesterday, they're all kind of above the line, I guess. But what you're looking for is that person who even exceeds that next line and puts himself in that rarefied air. And if you've got that guy, and, I say sometimes it needs to be a front seven guy. LSU's guy like that last year probably was a cornerback in Derek Stingley. But these national championship teams seem to have that superstar game wrecker, my 8-year-old son who likes college football but's not, able to tell you everybody on every roster, the guy that my 8-year-old son knows about and has heard of. That seems to be the kind of thing that the best teams seem to have. GB2 says, does Darnell Washington have a touchdown yet? No touchdown for Big O yet, but that could be on the way soon. Rodney Hewitt says Nakobe Dean could be that emerging star. Could very well be. Trayvon Walker, Nolan Smith, Jalen Carter, all as well. That's exactly right. All of those guys, I would say, are candidates for that for sure. P. Rich says Nyland Green is a must-have. I'm sure many of you have been kind of following the online chatter as of late, which seems to have linked Nyland Green back to Clemson again. I'll I'll let the industry speak for itself on that for a moment, but that should certainly be something worth watching. Memphis Dog says, any rumors of the NCAA increasing the scholarship limits for 2021? I would say probably no. Now, I haven't heard about that, and, I'm often wrong, but my prediction is that the majority of the NCAA schools would not be in favor of that. If you gave Georgia a vote, would you like to increase the scholarship limit? Georgia would say, absolutely. How many can we have? Can we have 200? Because Georgia would love to do that. The schools that are trying to get to Georgia's level don't want the big teams to have any more room for players than they have. And unfortunately, the majority of the votes on something like this, it's like a lot of things in life, frankly. The majority of the votes on something like this are for a level just below where Georgia is, where they don't want increased scholarships. They want to put a cap on what Georgia's able to do. Or not just Georgia, but the programs that have the resources, that have the recruiting power, that have all of that. The majority of the NCAA wants to keep them from increasing their advantage. Jay Shimes asks a good question. He says, any coincidence that teams are scoring more because of the more lax approach on defense, because of the ticky-tack targeting penalties, things like that? So you actually took it in a different direction at the end than I thought you were going to go to. But it is kind of interesting that if you look year over year in the SEC, now I don't know if this is still true as much as it was true a couple of weeks ago, but you can look at like the statistical benchmarks of 2019 and see where you would rank in the SEC, compare that to 2020, and better numbers kind of rank worse. Mike Griffith would do this in some of his stories where he'd be like, here's how many yards a game Georgia's averaging, here's how many points a game Georgia's averaging. And if you kind of compared it year over year, a better number would maybe mean a lower rank. In other words, let's say that I'm just going to pick numbers here. Let's say you're averaging 31 points a game. That may have been good for 5th best in the SEC last year, but it may only be good for 7th best in the SEC this year. Now, that, at least from a common sense standpoint, does not make a lot of sense because last year's numbers would have included all 12 of your regular season games, whereas this year's numbers would only include games against the SEC opponents. So it seems like the numbers should be lower, but actually offensively, they've been a little bit higher. Is this because it's another example of offenses just taking a big step forward away from their competition on the other side of the ball on defense? Or is this because of lack of practice for defenses? They haven't been able to be as physical as the commenter suggested. It may take us a little longer to see how this trend is going, but if you put up the same numbers year over year, 2019 to 2020, in the SEC, where you rank in comparison to league foes would actually be lower this year than it would have been last year, and that I don't believe is what many of us would have predicted. Silent Chaos says with JT at quarterback, he's going to take his shots. Yeah, I love that. And that's one of the things I think was the most visually stimulating about the game on Saturday is how many times the ball just was going deep down the field. Those shot plays where it's, you're really, drawing your eyes to see where that's going. You want to see that. I'm a big believer, like the old school NFL idea of, hey, you better swing for the fences at least 4 times a game. You really better go for that big one, a handful of times a game, because if you hit 1 or 2 of those, it has the potential of changing everything. I think that's an important part of football, and it's nice to see Georgia doing some of that on Saturday. Randy Martin says, don't wear the black jerseys because they jinx the team. Randy Hall says MJ Sherman could be a star. Maybe he could very well be. Tennille Calvino wants to play Notre Dame again. That'd be a lot of fun. Chad Buchanan says, really need Ringo to get some reps this season for sure. Yeah, I think the problem with that is he's just going to be hurt, truly injured, not able to do that. But the star shines still very bright for him, I believe, overall. Let's see what else is going on over here on Facebook. Joe Saxon asks, where's Nolan Smith? This is one of those questions that kind of comes up. Nolan's still on the field for whatever reason. Maybe those big-time dominant plays haven't happened for him yet. I don't have any indication that from Georgia's standpoint he's not doing his job, not living up to their expectations for him. I don't have any reason to believe that. But certainly in terms of the kind of dynamic plays a lot of fans would have hoped to have seen from him, a guy that was really well known for his pass rushing skills on the recruiting trail. We haven't seen that from him as of yet. So when you're thinking about that guy that could emerge into that superstar role, obviously Smith's name's going to continue to be there. Jonathan Wade says, any update on Donovan Edwards? I think this all kind of comes down to two things. Can you get Edwards to take a trip on his own dime to come to Georgia? And it's just one of those things where that makes it more inconvenient. If Georgia could pay Edwards' way, they'd do that 17 ways to Sunday. But this is obviously not available in this current climate, so it has to be on his own to take the motivation to pay his way, to do all of that. And that's just sometimes kind of hard to convince somebody else to spend that money. So that's a challenge. But there's also the fact that Michigan's not very good right now. And so you have the extended dead period working against you, but you have at least what I would think of as the number one rival for Georgia, the in-state school, Michigan. They're awful. And there's just no juice around the program in Ann Arbor at all. So does the problems for Michigan outweigh the challenges of getting a guy like that to come down to Georgia? It's a long trip. You don't quite have the same gravitational pull from Michigan to Georgia. It may be a little easier to get a guy like Mason Smith to travel over from Louisiana because it's still, south to south. Mason may know a good bit about, Georgia from that standpoint. So you wonder which of those two things weighs more heavily than the other, the geographic challenge in a year in which there's no visits, or the fact that the Michigan star has just gotten tarnished here. Randy Hall says, what food are you having for Thanksgiving? I'm a very traditional person. I'm sure many of you are surprised to hear that I am a man of tradition. So it's all about the turkey. There will be some ham. My mom does a great job getting all this. Really, it's a great, great spread. A lot of starches. Yeah, I always say, if it's fried, it's there's a lot of starches on the table there. A lot of mashed potatoes, great dressing. It's like my grandmother's recipe for that. Macaroni and cheese, kind of baked in the crock pot. I like kind of very. I like dry macaroni and cheese. I don't like too wet, soggy macaroni and cheese. And so in the crock pot, it's nice and dry the way I want it to be. Connor's all of a sudden very fired up about this topic.
Oh, Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday of the year, and talking about food. We're going to do a deep-fried turkey. That's my responsibility. I also cook the mashed potatoes. Got to make sure you get a lot of sour cream. I put some cheese in there as well, good. Along with the other appropriate fixings that befit a holiday of this. I'm a ham guy. My family is not of Southern origin, therefore macaroni and cheese, it's questionable if it's going to be on the table.
Is that only a Southern food?
In my experience, it is a more traditional Southern staple. You are more likely to see macaroni and cheese on a table with dressing than you are with stuffing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So when you say stuffing, do you actually stuff what I would call dressing in the turkey to cook it? Because that's a salmonella issue.
So when in the predated days before we had been enlightened to deep frying our turkeys, that is how it would be done. But now we prepare it separately outside.
Because if you're putting like all that sausage and stuff like that in the dressing, and then putting that in the bird and then baking it that way, folks, I'm gonna tell you something right now. You are not getting those internal things to the right temperature.
No,
that
no
is
chance.
No
chance.
That is a potentially deadly Thanksgiving meal.
Be safe out there on Thanksgiving. If you're gonna deep fry your turkey, make sure it's thawed out. You don't want to blow up your garage.
It'll explode.
It'll explode. You don't want to blow up your backyard. You don't want any of that. Take the proper precautions to make sure that you are present, safe. All your fingers and toes are accounted for at Thanksgiving on Thursday.
Yeah, I think that's all well said for sure. Kevin McGarvey, by the way, bringing up Zamir White. Are people talking enough about him and kind of what Kevin says he hasn't done thus far this year? This will not be a satisfying answer to very many people, but I do believe it's true. That I think sometimes we have a very strong appreciation for, as I said before, superstar player. We know what that guy looks like. We also kind of have an idea of a player that maybe needs to be replaced, the guy that's just not getting his job done. Sometimes we don't have a very good picture in our mind of this guy is just simply good, and he's simply a solid starter. I would say in Zamir White's case, this is probably right now not what DeAndre Swift was, not what Sony Michel and Nick Chubb were, but I would say that Zamir White is still a good running back. Now, how much has he been hampered by the fact that Georgia's passing game hasn't quite gotten off or whatever else? Honestly, I think it'll take time to tell us more about that. But ultimately, I think my thing with Zamir White is that White is a good, capable running back. Now, you may say, hey, Georgia's RBU. Georgia needs better than that at the running back position. I'd certainly be fine with that. Obviously, you want to have as many top-end players as you can get. But what I see White as right now is a good player. Almost any team in the country would be glad to have him. Maybe kind of below the real household name level that the last few Georgia running backs have kind of been at. Matt Talley says he likes Stover's mac and cheese, slightly burn on top. Yeah, I don't mind a little slight burn on the top. I don't mind that at all. Don't mind that at all. Steve Shafini says I make ziti on Thanksgiving. It's a tradition. Boy, that sounds pretty good. That does sound good. So Thad Bowersock says I live in Pennsylvania. We have macaroni and cheese every Thanksgiving. Well, that's good to know, Thad. I'm glad to hear that because I do love some macaroni and cheese. My gay says, just give me a feed bag and I'll eat it. I like the idea of that. Chris Slim White wondering about Micaiah Tongue. It's one of those guys we haven't seen a lot yet. There's a few of those receivers there that are kind of fighting for their chance to be on the field. I think some of this just kind of comes down to a numbers game. You know, even though the Georgia offense has left something to be desired, this is still a pretty deep crop of players from a talent standpoint, and it's just hard to get on the field. I don't know that's an indictment against Tongue as much as it is just a challenge of kind of finding that opportunity. And Akimi Yudoku talking about a Nigerian Thanksgiving. I'd love to find out how that might be different. You may have to tell us more about that, Akimi. I would love to find out more about that. Lucy Bowers-Boykin not happy with Connor for saying stuffing. Yeah, I know. You can only do so much with people. Robert Barnes, I do like the cornbread dressing. That's good stuff. Nick Vernon says we're missing Kendall Milton. Yeah, I'd love to see more of him for sure. Easy Brown says it's dressing. I would even go so far as to say it's dress in. It's not just dressing, it's dress in. It's dressing. I'd go so far as to say that. It's also one of those things where I don't think I fully appreciated how good dressing is until I got a little older. It's one of those things that I think is so good I'm surprised we'll only eat a couple times a year. It's got to be pretty close to the most fattening thing you can eat, I'm guessing. But I do enjoy it. All right, we're going to get ready to go for right now. We've got so many things to do. I'd love to talk about food the whole time. And Akemi also comparing Zamir White to Najee Harris. Yeah, that's a tough comparison. You know, Najee's really separated himself right now, and that's, you know, obviously, you know, having that kind of, as Connor said, we've said this before too. You look at these dynamic passing games. You know, you've had the Najee Harris for Alabama this year. You've had the Clyde Edwards-Helaire for LSU last year. Right now, Florida doesn't quite have that elite back. I would say they're better running the football than they were a year ago, but they don't really quite have that elite back that if you want to be national champion good, you've got to have Trevor Lawrence and you've got to have Travis Etienne. You've got to have that guy. In fact, it'll be one of the interesting things to see about Ohio State as we get closer to, you know, true playoff type stuff. Them without right now what I would call the elite back. I don't know that Sermon or Teague is necessarily that guy. You kind of wonder, well, if they don't have their Najee Harris the way that we've kind of thought of Ohio State as having those kind of backs before, how much does that hurt their chances of winning a national championship? Epic Robinson, thanks for the kind words. Yeah, I'm always kind of false starting on the way out the door here. Ooh, Matt Rukavina says, wife is from El Paso. She's got some good Southwestern dishes. So we've got a nice little Nigerian Thanksgiving. We had some Italian Thanksgiving from our buddy Steve. Matt says we got some kind of Tex-Mex Southwestern style stuff. That's great. Who knew there was such an international flavor to what we're doing here on DawgNation Daily? Randy Hall says Connor is a ham. Yeah, I guess maybe some. Nick Scheinman says, I was excited to talk dog football, not dressing. Sorry. We only did this for like 2 minutes. We've been on the air for 2 hours. But I should have known that would be coming. All right. We're going to get ready to go. For real this time. Anything else before we do? All right, thanks for being here on our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. I keep forgetting to do this. We got to try to do this tomorrow, Connor. Try to help me remember this. So Dari was the home, to give a free plug here for a moment, he was the Home Depot backyard for game day 2 weeks ago, and I've got a picture of it. I keep forgetting. Oh, there you go. Did we already do this? Yeah. So you hear me talk about Dari from R.S. Andrews? There he is. He was the Home Depot backyard for game day 2 weeks ago when it was in Augusta there. So big thanks to Dari and the whole team there. He's the one sitting down with the finger up with the child in his lap, the Georgia gear on. By the way, good job by Dari having all the Georgia gear going on there. Dari's actually an East Carolina graduate, but he's got Georgia gear head to toe right there. So good job by him on that. And a big thanks to all my friends at R.S. Andrews for making the R.S. Andrews cool down possible. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. You can trust R.S. Andrews to do all that for you. They do a great job for us here. By the way, AJC.com for your Atlanta news now. Great time last night with the AJC community conversation. Enjoyed speaking to some of the elite runners at the front of the pack for the virtual running of the AJC Peachtree Road Race coming up on Thursday. Great job as well by Rich Kanah, the executive director of the Atlanta Track Club, talking about how this year's event is going to be different than ever before, not on the customary July 4th date, starting on Thanksgiving and a period of really heading through the weekend to get your numbers in for your own virtual running, selecting your own route for that. So if you're a part of that, you want to know more about it, just go to any of the AJC video channels on Facebook or YouTube. You can watch that for yourself, and make sure you check out AJC.com for all of your Atlanta news now. All right, so schedule, normal tomorrow, off on Thanksgiving, pre-recorded on Friday, live from Columbia on Saturday. Does that all make sense? I'll see you here 10 a.m. tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Have a great day, everybody. For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.